4 builders have been singled out by the Commissioner in his startling expose of the pool industry. They're named in a report into 97 complaints investigated over the past 8 weeks. He says the companies have shown a callous disregard for the interests of some customers. The first 2 companies are Blue Dolphin Pools and Spas of St Mary's and Omega Pools of Dernacourt. The Commissioner says both have poor after-sales service.
If problems develop after the pool is completed, it seems to be very difficult to get some pool builders, not all of them, some of them to come back and provide the necessary after-sales service to rectify these problems. Whereas the same builders, pool builders, are often on the doorstep very promptly whenever a progress payment is due.
The Daniel Swan group of companies, run by Mr John Fabian, is criticised for blistering of the gel coat in fiberglass pools. The report says there's a 50% chance of that problem developing and a 100% certainty Mr Fabian will do nothing about it. Eyewitness News reported last week on Inga Brittingham, who after 12 months and $17,000 still has not got a functional pool. The Commissioner has warned customers not to deal with Zenu Pools, the company that built that pool. It's recently been expelled as a member of the Swimming Pool and Spa Association of South Australia, as has Omega Pools. But until Consumer Affairs began its investigations, the company remained a member despite not having a licence or registered business name. But in the second prong of his attack, Mr Noblet says some builders who are not operating satisfactorily are still allowed to be SPASA members. He says that despite the association blatantly selling itself as an industry regulator that protects those who deal with its members, it is not living up to its promises. The Commissioner also warns intending pool owners to be careful of dealing with Silver Lake pools. The report says that in contrast to members of self-regulatory organisations covering car dealers and other industries that attract complaints, SPASA members are distinctly uncooperative. He is investigating ways to strengthen the Builders Licensing Act to better protect the public, but in the meantime has released a 3-page pamphlet for intending pool buyers.
The most important thing is to obtain a copy of the leaflet that we've just produced. But to go into a little more detail, be very careful about the pool builder that you select. If you're considering engaging a particular builder, ask him for the names of 3 or 4 people that he's built pools for before and check with them to see if they were satisfied with all aspects of their dealings with him. Be very careful about any contract that you're asked to sign. Make sure you understand it properly. If you're in any doubt about what the contract means, get some advice about it. Don't accept any promises without having them put in writing, and don't sign anything at all unless you fully understand it.
Executive Director of the Swimming Pool and Spa Association, Phil Macron, says 1,400 in-ground swimming pools were built during the period in question, and there are only 30 complaints against companies belonging to his association, although they amounted to half the number of complaints investigated. Mr Macron says all but one of the pools subject to complaint had now been completed, and he believes the majority of customers are satisfied with their swimming pools. Kirsty Coburn for Eyewitness News.
A state government deputation leaves for Canberra.
The Consumer Affairs Department says it's now their number one concern, with as many as 50 inquiries a day concerning contractual problems. Consequently, the government has asked the Commissioner for Consumer Affairs to review the situation, and the government is also considering legislation to further protect the rights of homeowners. Loeen Sweeney reports.
The owners of this house in Bridgewater have already forked out over $70,000 for its construction and fittings, but it's still far from finished. It was supposed to be completed in November last year, so they hired a caravan to keep a roof over their heads.
Well, you can imagine 6 of us in an 8 by 15 foot caravan, a baby locked up in a cot, children, I mean you can imagine what a baby's like waking up all night, children trying to do homework, my husband trying to do homework. It's just, also all the delays affect you a lot. Where you're continually waiting for things, like you wait for, I think it was about 8-10 weeks for carpenters, and every day you come up here and they still say they'll be here next week or the week after, and it just goes on and on and on and on for weeks.
The Biordals are now living in this house but still feel like they're setting up camp. They've gyprocked over the outside doorways to keep the weather out. Inside there are no doors, skirting boards or ceiling cornices. It's supposed to be a 2-storey house, but the Biordals are using a makeshift ladder to have access to the 2nd floor so they can complete the work for themselves at even further expense. It's a dream home become a never-ending nightmare, but the Biordals are not on their own.
We had a driveway that broke up, paving that dropped away from the house to such an extent it couldn't be walked on. We had a courtyard that sank so that the water was draining back into the house, which is against regulations, both council and building regulations. And we have an ensuite bathroom that has never worked. The shower keeps leaking, and it has been retiled 3 times. The workmanship is just so poor that we haven't got anywhere, and this has been going on since February 1984.
Well, both bathrooms are leaking in the shower area. We've had the whole entire top floor re-nailed because the builder didn't put enough nails in the floor. The retaining wall didn't have council approval, although it should have. The builder has left a lot of rubbish on our block since settlement, which we specifically asked not to be left, and have asked for removal with no results. Just a lot of general problems with workmanship. There are a lot of areas where we don't consider the workmanship is up to scratch.
This office in the sprawling southern suburbs is regularly visited by disgruntled homebuyers. It's the office of Susan Lenihan, the member for Mawson, and there are a lot of people in her electorate having homes built. She raised their concerns in Parliament in June last year.
Lowen, I've been overwhelmed with response. I have a file here which would indicate the number of people that have contacted this office, not just from my own electorate, but from all over Adelaide, who are really concerned about the problems of home building that they're experiencing in South Australia at the moment.
Well, do you think the contracts are essentially misleading, that people don't know what they're signing?
Well, I've had a chance to observe very closely some of the contracts, and I think the contracts in some cases certainly are weighted in favour of the builder. The second problem is that many people sign contracts, they don't fully understand what they've signed. There is no cooling off period, which is unlike the situation if you buy an already constructed home. And also, they haven't had a chance to fully appreciate what it means for them. And there are things like rise and fall, which are not clearly understood, and variation clauses as well.
According to the building industry, all these problems are the result of a boom in house construction. They say they have the capacity to take it on, but there aren't enough tradesmen to meet the demand. That results in delays and added costs. But should builders be making commitments in the first place that they know they can't meet?
People want homes built, so they come to the builders and they've asked them to sign a contract with them, and the builders have taken on the commitment. But I believe in many cases the builders didn't realise or appreciate there weren't going to be the number of tradesmen around to be able to handle the volume of work coming to them.
Do you think builders perhaps are misleading their customers by making verbal agreements that they can renege on?
Well, I guess that's going to happen in a lot of areas. People do make verbal commitments. We find in the course of contracts, a consumer asks for something verbally and the builder gives an answer verbally. It's amazing at the end of the contract how people forget the verbal statements they've made. And what we say very clearly, get it in writing.
One of the standard contracts that's used in South Australia contains this clause. This contract has been entered into by the owner on his own investigation and inspection, and no party should be bound or affected by any representation, promise or statement not herein contained. In other words, what they're saying in that clause is that whatever we've promised you or said to you up until now means absolutely nothing.
This is the standard contract the Commissioner is quoting from, which covers 80% of homes built in this state. Consumer Affairs say it's complicated and couched in unnecessary legal terms. The document is issued by the Housing Industry Association, who defend its fairness, but want the government to help them make it even fairer.
If the government will come to the industry, such as ourselves, we're more than happy to sit down and talk to them about the problem areas they see. We need to get a profile from the government. We know of some areas that do cause concern, but if they'll come and talk to us, I'm sure that we can put together a contract that will be
taken off the market after the child's death last month and was today officially banned.
The dangerous part of the toy is the knob on the end of the handle. It comes off and gets into the child's throat.
Are these toys readily available in Adelaide retail stores?
Not now, they were, but they've been taken off the market.
How many were in the state?
Around the 500-600.
I believe there's a safe equivalent on the market.
Yes, there's a Fisher-Price toy which has a T-shaped handle, which the child can't get into its mouth, whereas this one, the child can swallow it and get it caught in the back of its throat.
But also because it raises the possibility of individuals suing churches for extensive damages. Scientologists from many countries, including Australia, have gone to Portland to demonstrate outside the court where the decision was made. It's from Oregon that Tony Eastley reports.
On the rally squad, she was on the ski team, she was very active in her Lutheran Church youth group. Just a beautiful, small-town American girl.
So Gary McMurray, lawyer, he's been fighting the case for 6 years.
Oh, sure, they appeared and testified.
Heber Jench, church leader, he's been fighting McMurray all the way.
So you have a group of people in that Tichborne case who are what they call deprogrammers or depersonalizers is a better name, who are kidnappers for profit, who have taken people from different religions. In the United States, it's been Catholics, there have been Mormons, there have been the newer religions, the growing religions.
And this is the woman they've been fighting over, Julie Tichborne, who claims she was defrauded of her life savings when she enrolled in a communication course at the Church of Scientology.
I went in thinking that the organization was there to benefit people and to help people and to use the money they made to help more people, and not to just take the money and siphon it off for the benefit of one person.
Heber Jench is the world president of the Church of Scientology. From the church's headquarters here in Los Angeles, the Reverend Jench claims to hold sway over 6 million members worldwide, more than 500,000 of them in Australia. The Church of Scientology was founded in 1954 and at its peak in the early to mid-70s was reportedly earning more than $100 million annually. L. Ron Hubbard, science fiction writer, self-professed genius, war hero and recluse, laid the foundation for the church with his book Dianetics, the modern science of mental health. Supporters say the book lays out Hubbard's concepts of mental health whereby members can improve communication and intelligence. Critics claim Hubbard's Scientology work is probably his greatest piece of imaginative science fiction. Entrance to the church begins with a communication course. In all, Scientologists can take more than 60 courses, according to the book What is Scientology? The courses are not free, and anyone taking them can expect to be a lot poorer, but that's the price you pay for spiritual enlightenment. Portland's a pretty small city by US standards, but it's nowhere near as small as the hometown of Julie Tichborne. When she came down to Portland in the 1970s, she was introduced to the Church of Scientology by her boyfriend. Soon she started to spend her life savings on enrolling in communication courses, and it wasn't long before she was borrowing money to pay for even more courses.
So Julie and April went back to little Eureka, Montana for the last attempt to handle her parents and get them to sign a release that they would never sue or criticize or attack the church, or she would disconnect from them. She went to sleep that night. Next morning she observed that all of the doorknobs inside the house had been removed and the windows had been nailed shut. And she was, in effect, held captive by her parents, mother and father, in her own home. A girlfriend came over on the third day, and Julie said, "You've got to get the police. These people are holding, my parents are crazy, they're holding me captive." So the young girl told Julie's mother, "You can't hold her. She's over 18. This is wrong." Her mother just broke down, finally lost all control, and just began to sob, and just absolutely knew that she had lost her daughter. With those tears, the doors to the house were open, and Julie's mind was open, and in 3 days of talking and listening, she became part of the old Julie.
She was held by her mother for 5 days in a locked room with the windows boarded up and all of the knobs taken off of the wall. Now, that might have been a typical home for Julie. I hope not, but that's where she changed. That's where the damage came. And then she was turned into a mindless robot.
The tensions between the parties began to increase, and so did the stakes. It was here at the courthouse in Portland that worldwide attention was focused on the Church of Scientology. Julie Tichborne claimed that she'd been swindled by her church, and a jury a few weeks ago decided that to put things right for Julie, it would cost the church $39 million in damages. Julie's lawyer claims she was defrauded by the church because she'd received none of the benefits she'd been promised, including improved eyesight. and they wouldn't refund her money.
She came in and signed documents. She knew it was a church. Then she claimed that her eyesight was bad. Let me just say this rather openly. It's kind of interesting. When she was then, in other words, when she came in, she couldn't see that it was a church. She didn't know it was a church, even though she signed documents saying it was a church. And then in court, approximately a few weeks ago, she was shown these documents. She recognized her name. She was able to read it to a jury. So in other words, when she came in, she was totally blind. And yet in the ensuing time, she can now see. I think she owes us $39 million. I'd say that was a miracle.
Religious freedom now! Religious freedom now!
The case made headlines not only because of the outstanding amount of damages, but also because of the way the Scientologists have lobbied to have their trial judge overturn the jury's verdict. Thousands of church members came into Portland from around the globe to demonstrate. As well as ordinary members, celebrity Scientologists like musician Chick Corea and actor John Travolta have joined the protest. There's also been a large contingent from Australia, and former ALP Secretary David Coombe has been in town as an observer. For the Scientologists, if they lose it, they're wide open. And although they argue that they're fighting on behalf of all religious freedom, their main aim is to save themselves from an avalanche of lawsuits.
America is looked to as the home of religious liberty. If it falls in America, then it will fall in other countries around the world.
It was actually started, though, wasn't it, by the church saying, no, you can't have your money back because...
No, the church offered her money back and she refused it.
Well, this is where there's a difference between the two parties. What did the court find there?
Well, the court found that, of course, that we had presented a check to her which was made out to her for a refund for her monies. We're the only church that does that. I think we should stop.
Flow all your power, all your positive energy in that courtroom. Okay?
If the judgment is upheld and Julie Tichburn gets the $39 million, she will not be a rich woman. Her lawyer says the money will go into a fund to fight cults and unusual religions.
And we're going to, hopefully, with the board of directors that have agreed to serve, establish a library and a teaching facility with all the documents that we can lay our hands on. We have millions of them about Scientology, the Moonies, Hare Krishnas, and other so-called new religions.
I hope it's a warning to this organization and any organization like this that is just out to get people's money and isn't telling the truth.
And what about L. Ron Hubbard, the self-styled prophet who hasn't been seen for years? What does he think of the case? And where is he now that his church really needs him?
I don't know where he is, but he knows where we are, and I hope that he's living very well. I think there's an attempt here to drive a wedge between Mr. Hubbard and the church. That's what Mr. McMurray and his gang of depersonalizers have started. And I think they wish that there was a God, because they don't believe in God. And I think they would wish there was some sort of penance that they could do to get out of this. But it's over for them. We'll win it. We are the anvil that will break all hammers.
Becomes reality. They try all the suggested cures, from acupuncture, hypnotherapy, nicotine-flavoured chewing gum, even cold turkey. But now a special Chinese tea is being hailed as the easy way to bust the habit. But as Tracy Bowden discovered, health authorities and the Cancer Council aren't quite as enthusiastic as the distributors of this strange tea.
We investigated it. It looked pretty good to us, and as the results now prove, it does in fact stop you from smoking.
Gold Coast businessman Peter Foster. His mother Louise discovered New Air tea on a trip to China.
And probably the best judge was my mother, who smokes 40 cigarettes a day and has for many years now. She tried New Air tea, and within about 10 to 12 days, the habit was completely broken and she no longer smokes.
It sounds too good to be true, but then so does the company's advertising.
After just 1 cup of New Air tea, you'll want to put out your next cigarette as soon as you light it.
The Fosters say New Air tea is just that, 100% Chinese tea. They say the key to its success lies in the unique way the tea leaves are cured. But not everyone is convinced that this is the way to bust the habit, especially the Cancer Council, which over the years has seen a string of quit smoking products burst onto the market.
There aren't any substances that will actually make you stop smoking.
Dr Gordon Sarfati, Medical Director of the New South Wales Cancer Council.
There's no evidence that tea consumption will help you quit smoking. In fact, one could infer the opposite, because there's a very strong correlation between tea consumption and cigarette smoking. And there have been 2 studies now, one here and one in Canada, that suggests the higher the tea and coffee consumption, the greater a number of cigarettes smoked.
Although she claims to have discovered the miracle tea, Louise Foster wouldn't talk to us. In fact, she didn't want her son to be interviewed either, claiming we'd taken a negative attitude to the story. But the Fosters are positive enough about their product to offer a money-back guarantee.
I guarantee anybody who writes to me with the packet, and if they didn't stop smoking, I will personally give them their money back.
All this attention is nothing new to Peter Foster. Back in 1981, when he was still in his teens, he was making guarantees as a boxing promoter.
I guarantee you, both men, no matter what, will keep on fighting until that last ounce of determination just isn't there. It'll be a tremendous fight. I myself, I was in sports promotion when I was very young, and recently I moved to television and filmed 3 television specials, one which was sold to a rival network. And then now I've gone into the tea promoting.
Do you think you can make a lot of money out of this?
Be honest with you, we are in it to make money. But by the same token, I think the product is very economically priced.
According to their advertising, the Fosters had the tea tested. So what sort of tests and what were the results?
The only tests that we conducted were not scientific, not without any great foundation, but only on people around us. But I think you yourself, if you gave a product to your mother, and I'm sure your mother you trust with your life, if it works for her, then you must realise that there is some foundation to the product.
So you don't know why it works?
It worked on my mother. It worked on 8 individuals that we tested it on. And from my point of view, that was a good enough reason for us to market the product.
You think 8 people saying it worked for them is enough to market it across Australia?
Without doubt.
Peter Foster claims the product is supported by some anti-smoking groups.
The Anti-Smoking Association of America have carried out studies on the product.
Never heard of the Anti-Smoking Association of America, no.
Ashes to Dust, which is an anti-smoking organisation in Canberra, have endorsed the product, and they're carrying out further studies.
A spokesman for Ashes to Dust told us his group does not endorse New Air Tea. The Federal Health Department has also taken an interest in New Air Tea and has asked the Fosters to provide scientific evidence that their tea does what they say it does. In the meantime, the department has asked the Fosters to moderate their advertising.
Any product that can stop people from smoking, it shouldn't be harassed, it shouldn't be put down. We're not doing anything. We are full page in newspapers. Here we are on your television program talking about it. If there was anything illegal, you don't think the health department would act?
Tracy Bowden reporting on yet another claim for an easy way to give up smoking. If you believe it, go and buy it.
In State Parliament. Deputy Premier Jack Wright has resigned from Cabinet because of ill health, and his replacement will be decided at a special meeting of Labor MPs.
Our Deputy Premier has reluctantly decided that the time has come, rather than jeopardise his health further and in fact run the risk of further problems over coming months, that he's simply had to announce that he will not be contesting the seat of Price and will be stepping down as Deputy Premier.
I've been fighting the possibility of standing down since December of last year, but from about April or May of this year I've been given very strong advice by my specialist that if I want to get well, that I should stand down.
It was an emotional media conference today as Mr Wright told journalists that he was regretfully stepping down. The Deputy Premier has suffered from a serious asthmatic complaint for much of his parliamentary career, a problem that has been aggravated in the past 6 months by a heavy workload as Deputy Premier, Labor Minister, Chief Secretary and Emergency Services Minister. 58-year-old Mr Wright is an ex-shearer and union boss and has represented the state seat of Adelaide for the Labor Party since 1971. He became a minister in the Dunstan government 4 years later, and during that era his state unemployment relief scheme pioneered job creation in Australia and later became the blueprint for the Hawke government's CEP scheme. Since becoming Emergency Services Minister 18 months ago, he has overseen the reorganisation of the CFS and established South Australia's first independent authority to investigate complaints against police. His departure will be a severe blow to the Bannon government, which is expected to go to the polls later this year. And it's been a decision that's been traumatic for the Deputy Premier.
Traumatic. I said earlier that I would have dearly loved to have been there fighting the next election. If I could have done it at even 80%, I would have been prepared to continue. But as I said, you must reach your own conclusions about whether you're performing for the people of South Australia, for the Labor Party and for yourself.
Federal Cabinet could take several days to make a decision about
and
tax
even
reform.
$10,000. It seemed easy enough. A warehouse full of old rags, machines to cut them, and allegedly the promise of an income of $600 to $700 a week. But when the investors followed up their money, they found an empty office. It transpires that the Western Australian government has investigated a similar scheme in that state, and now authorities are afraid the organisers could be looking at South Australia as a new target. Attorney General Chris Sumner has been in touch with his interstate counterparts following requests from the media for information. At this stage, he says, there's no evidence that the operation has reached here, but authorities will be on the lookout for anything similar, hopeful of protecting South Australians and their investment money.
There have been violent clashes between police and protesters in Northern Ireland. The police were clearing the way for the March of the Orangemen, a traditional show of strength by Protestants.
The RUC said they'd changed their minds to allow the parade through to keep the peace, avoiding a challenge from the Protestant paramilitaries. This man was knocked unconscious. 5 policemen were also injured. The road cleared, flags were hoisted, and the march, which has been routed through the same area for 150 years, went ahead as the Orangemen had planned. A victory for them, an embarrassment to both police and government who desperately want to appear impartial. Catholic crowds yelled abuse as the parade made its homeward journey following a church service. Stones were thrown at the marchers. One of them was hit on the head. Today, the police have clashed with Republican protesters, but similar confrontations with loyalists are likely during the big 12th of July parades here.
The relatives of Australian fugitive Robert Trimboli are continuing to deny reports that he's dead, and our investigations in his hometown in Italy appear to confirm their story. It seems reports that Trimboli has been buried at Prati are untrue.
From this small village, 5,000 people have left in the last 40 years for the town of Griffith in New South Wales. Unlike most mountain villages in this area, the cemetery at Prati is firmly padlocked. Any request for access is greeted by a blank refusal. Apart from the heavy padlock, there's high-voltage electric wire running around the cemetery walls. Since our arrival in the village, we'd been followed by 2 men who approached us directly at the cemetery gates. The men indicated to us that we should return in 1 hour, with no further explanation. To our surprise, the appointment was kept, and we were shown what amounts to a private burial ground for the Trimboli family. Even members of the family who died elsewhere are buried here in Prati. One of these men, who identified himself only as a relative of the Trimboli family, told me that Robert Trimboli was still alive, but would not offer any proof or evidence. We were given a complete tour of the cemetery and saw familiar Griffith family names such as Sergi, but no evidence of a new Trimboli tomb. In spite of this apparently cooperative tour of the cemetery, most villagers just turn away at the mere mention of Trimboli's name.
Although it may seem
So
longer,
it entered a loan contract with major finance companies. On average, they ended up $2,000 poorer. Well, in an historic move, the Geelong consumers decided on a class action to try and get some of that money back. Debbie Byrne reports on consumer history in the making.
Well, we've lost out with the free movie swaps that we're not going to get now. The after-sales service, which is non-existent now, we can't get the thing repaired.
It's not very good. I think we've really been ripped off.
When ES&R in Geelong closed their doors, its consumers held a public meeting and decided to act together to fight for their rights. Their targets were the companies that had financed their deals. They wanted refunds, or at least outstanding amounts deducted from their contracts,
for the services which now just weren't around to be used. Led by financial counsellor Colin Kent and under the guidance of Consumer Affairs, they had a series of meetings with finance companies in Geelong. Well, 2 months later, the Geelong consumers are back at a public meeting, but this time the news is good. A deal with the finance companies has been worked out, and if the people here accept it, it will mean a first for consumers.
First of all, the offer is this, that the consumers will pay for the goods that they received at a reasonable price and not at an inflated price. Secondly, the consumers will pay for the proportion of services they received. Finally, formulae have been devised so that you will only pay interest on the goods and services that you received.
2 seconds to think about it. Can we have a show of hands for those people who would be happy to accept the proposals? Well, I think it's, it's fairly unanimous.
Well, the average consumer will probably receive something like $1,200. But actually, to the companies, it means a very substantial loss. And in fact, as we've measured it, something in the order of $1.5 million.
Well, what's your reaction to the whole deal?
I think it's excellent. I think this is the first time that consumers have banded together, that through the joint action, or what we've necessarily called a class action, they've received some compensation. This is a real victory and sets now a precedent.
Ironically, there's one group of people who are still the losers. They're the people who could afford to pay cash up front.
And we are not satisfied with the solutions that have been given for the people who have been paid cash. It's just one of those few situations where you pay cash and you lose money.
But for the rest of the group, it's been a lesson learnt the hard way.
Well, I think the system stinks, really. I think the system needs to be looked into to stop this from happening. And it shouldn't have happened.
No, I don't think I'll be signing anything like that again.
You've learnt the lesson?
My oath, it's been very expensive, but well learnt.
Debbie Byrne reporting from Geelong. In a moment, a character you won't want to miss. Just back in a moment.
For 40 cents, there's a limit to what you can say between most cities.
And has exposed an Adelaide travel agency which has apparently failed, owing thousands of dollars. Fraud Squad detectives are now investigating.
The Norwood Travel Centre on Glenburn Road has been closed for a fortnight. The office was still in darkness today as the Consumer Affairs Department called a press conference to warn people who've had dealings with the firm to check their travel arrangements. The department was able to name the firm under the Prices Act following several complaints from travellers who found supposed bookings made by the centre had, in fact, not been booked. According to Consumer Affairs Director Jim Servin, it's become apparent the centre has accepted as much as $50,000 for travel services which don't exist.
Well, firstly, I would advise that they check with the airline that they think that they're booked with to ensure that they are, and that they check with any hotel that they think they have accommodation with.
Mr Servin says the proprietor of the firm, a Mr Ronald Stanley Dinnan, can't be found. Mr Dinnan was questioned by the department some weeks ago but has now disappeared. Mr Servin says anyone who's had dealings with the centre should contact Burnside Police or the Consumer Affairs Department.
Johnny's has been taken over by David Jones, but management of both shops...
Hands of the police, but both the police and us will be going in to their premises to try and establish just who is involved.
This afternoon, police and Consumer Affairs personnel searched the Tranmere office of Norwood Travel Centre. The shop had been closed for 2 weeks and clients have had no contact with the owner, Ron Dinnan. The Consumer Affairs Department says anyone considering a holiday should go to a recognised and larger agency. Norwood Travel Centre has left dozens of useless bookings to America, Europe and Singapore. Tonight, police are examining material taken from the shop, but any investigations will be cold comfort to travellers hit by this latest travel debacle. Rod White, Eyewitness News.
The police scallop patrol...
As Rick Teague reports, the Consumer Affairs Department today issued a warning about the agency.
The agency named by the Consumer Affairs Director is the Norwood Travel Centre, which is housed in the Westpac Bank building on Glenburn Road at Tranmere. Officers of the department used their special powers this afternoon to raid the premises and seize the company's records. The department says it's received reports from disgruntled customers alleging the agency has accepted at least $18,000 for travel services it's been unable to provide. However, they now believe the sum could be far greater. The travel agency has been closed for 2 weeks now, and the authorities say they've been unable to contact the proprietor, one Ronald Dynan. Friends and business associates also say they've been unable to trace the man. According to Consumer Affairs, the problems associated with the travel centre first came to light in April of this year.
In that case, we dealt with the firm, with the airline company, and managed to get the people to Singapore for their holiday. There was another consumer about the same time that had a similar problem, and we managed to deal with that. Now, you don't make statements such as this just on as a result of 2 complaints, particularly when the proprietor makes an attempt at redress. It's the subsequent things that have happened since that cause us to make these statements.
Have you any advice for people who may have dealt with this agency in the past?
Well, my advice to them would be, if they've got a booking, or if they think they've got a booking through Norwood Travel Centre, that they should check with the airline concerned to see that the tickets have actually been issued. Check with any hotels where they've booked accommodation or think they've booked accommodation to see whether they have, and if there's any difficulty at all, to contact the Burnside CIB.
After the vigorous buying of
later this month, the Consumer Affairs Department has warned anyone who booked travel or accommodation through the agency to check whether their trips have been confirmed. Anyone who has problems is asked to contact the department and the police. The collapse has again raised questions about the protection of travellers. The state government says negotiations are continuing in an effort to set up a compensation fund and to have the agents licensed.
There has been a speedy settlement in the...
The operator should carry a personal trust fund. The Federation of Travel Agents says the whole situation could be prevented with a simple membership. Rod White reports.
The apparent collapse of yet another travel agent yesterday came as no surprise to many in the industry. Only 60% of agents are members of the Travel Agents Federation. If the Norwood Travel Centre had been a member, its clients would now be getting their precious savings back. Some agents say they carry a trust fund and don't need Federation backing. What is required is a well police system backed up by law.
We're asking for an initial fee of $300, the bulk of that would be used up to set up a national fund for rescuing this sort of situation, a $100 fee for licensing, and a $100 fee for the books every year being audited by a national body.
There's been a delay of almost a decade, mostly caused by politicians not wanting to act.
Well, I think the only thing that stands in the way at the moment is for the various departments, the Consumer Affairs departments, legislating for this to happen immediately. We could be operating here within 4 months with licensing if we can get the Consumer Affairs department to agree to the new draft and legislate for it immediately.
Attorney General Chris Sumner says negotiations are continuing and he's looking at AFTA's new plan. Meanwhile, the 43-year-old man named by Consumer Affairs yesterday has been charged with 4 counts of fraud in relation to Norwood Travel Centre. The man from Rostrevor will appear in court on Monday. Rod White, Eyewitness News.
The man was arrested by detectives at his home overnight and has been released on police bail of $10,000.
Police and the Department of Consumer Affairs began an investigation into the travel agency's affairs after receiving complaints about $18,000 worth of travel bookings. When Consumer Affairs investigators searched the company's offices on Glenburn Road yesterday, they found piles of accounts, receipts and paperwork. The offices had allegedly been unoccupied for about 2 weeks. The proprietor's passport was also found, but the photograph was missing. The Director of Consumer Affairs named the proprietor as Ronald Stanley Dynan, using the authority of the Prices Act. He warned anyone with bookings with the Norwood Travel Centre to check their tickets, as some of the vouchers had been found to be worthless. The man, arrested by police, is expected to appear in the Adelaide Magistrates Court next Monday. Graham Badger, 7 National.
You're doing work for. Now, Mr Noblet knows that one of his officers and myself are a part of a committee that is going to Sydney, forming a standard association contract. And one of the major problems that we have faced, and this is a national contract, not a state contract, one of the major problems that we have faced is that the consumer will sometimes not part with his money because he doesn't trust the builder. and then, of course, the builder will not continue with the operation because he doesn't think the customer is going to pay him. It is a problem that we are faced with.
Yeah, but don't
the
you think it's
association, if I
fair?
can just finish, the association has a complaints committee in its own right, and Mr. Noblet knows that we spend a lot of time voluntary, none of us get paid for it, and the association handles a lot of complaints in the industry that don't even go to Consumer Affairs, but those sort of things haven't been mentioned in the report.
Yeah, but how much fairer can you be that you say, look, there is the money, there it is. I put it in my solicitor's trust account, and if you finished your pool to our satisfaction, there it is, take it. And Mr. Chapman refused it.
That is not so. I have all the correspondence from your solicitor here, and not in one letter has that offer been made. Now this...
I have got the letter here.
I'm sorry, I do not have the letter, and I can't be any fairer than stating, give me a post-dated cheque for the work that was, for the amount that was due
But
6 or 8 months ago.
What sort of an agreement is this between business people that you accept
I
post-dated
think we have
checks?
to come back here to principals. Susan Denham.
I'd like to pick up a couple of points about the Swimming Pool and Spa Association. And it seems to me that if the Swimming Pool and Spa Association were genuine, the fact that you've acknowledged there were so many complaints, wouldn't you then have perhaps suggested setting up some sort of trust fund into which the payments that Trudy has alluded to should be actually paid into? And secondly, that it's been drawn to my attention that members of the Swimming Pool and Spa Association are investigating themselves, in the sense that one particular member was apparently investigating another member within a couple of weeks, and then the situation was reversed. This seems to me to be an incredible situation where the association would seem to be more interested in promoting and advertising than in acting as a self-regulatory and watchdog on the industry.
Okay, let me take the first part of your question first, is that we already have a trust fund with the association, and in fact, very recently we have offered to, in the case of a certain dispute, which Consumer Affairs were involved with a certain member of our association, we offered to take the money into our trust account and only pay the builder when the work was done in a satisfactory manner. And we offered to allow Consumer Affairs to be the arbitrary case. The lady refused that offer. Now, what do we do in a situation like that? Now, we made the offer to her. We offered to take over the contract and to finish the pool in a satisfactory manner, and the lady refused.
Well, look, I think I know who you're referring to, and
Yes.
it's my constituent.
Exactly.
And that particular person had paid $12,000 of a total $14,000 for a swimming pool and spa pool. It's almost 12 months ago. She has never been able to use the spa pool, and the swimming pool is unsafe because it doesn't have a grate on the bottom. I don't think I'd blame her for not wanting to hand over any more money. She's already parted with $12,000. She's practically had a nervous breakdown over the whole matter. And it's no wonder that she is a little bit hesitant about handing over any more money. She obviously wants to see the thing finished, and then she'll pay the rest.
She's also been served with a notice from the NWS department that because the pool builder excuse me, didn't get the NWS approval before the pool was built, the sewage pipes have to be pulled up and replaced. And that's going to cost you much more than the amount that's outstanding.
An extra $5,000, I believe.
My company was made aware of this complaint, which wasn't to do with our company. On behalf of the industry generally, Blue Dolphin Pools approached this particular lady that we're talking about, and we calculated by our contractors going to her property, viewing what was uncompleted and what she wasn't happy with, that we could complete the pool to her satisfaction for the amount that she still owed the pool builder. This is in a letter to her on the 3rd of May, and
What's the last paragraph of that letter?
I hope the above is assistance to you in completing your pool.
The bit before it then.
The above prices are at cost, and payment will be made direct to the tradesmen and suppliers involved.
She'd have to deal directly with the suppliers. It wasn't your company that was doing it at all.
Yes, that's the problem.
Mr. Scott, I think perhaps if I can get a final comment from you. Do you not accept, in the face of the very obvious concern in the community, the need for greater self-regulation amongst the pool builders and spa builders?
No, well, I believe the comments that have been made about the association are grossly unfair. I think the association has done a tremendous job over the years. If you go back a few years ago and see the problems that were in the industry with unfinished pools, we are now talking about finished pools that have got minor complaints that have been blown out of all proportion.
So you're not prepared to change at all?
I'm sorry, I didn't say that. What I believe is that it's better to have an association that is 80% effective than no association at all. And I think that is the comment that I would make in reciprocation to what's been said today.
Commissioner Noblet, if I can put the final question to you, do you accept that what Mr Scott has said?
No, I think there's a great deal of room for improvement in the way that the association looks after its members, or the interests of people who deal with its members, and I hope that by cooperation between the department and the association we can do something about that in the future.
And possibly one further rider, to what extent does this situation, is that reflected in other areas of consumer affairs?
Yes, I think generally with the downturn in the economy there are a number of tradesmen in all sorts of areas that are taking shortcuts and not doing things as well as they would do if things were better.
Andrew, I'd like to just add something. I'd like to call on the attorney, and I'm going to be writing to him, to seek perhaps further legislation which will protect consumers in this situation. They're outlaying an enormous amount of money, and I think they need extra protection. It's not good enough to say, well, the association is 80% effective. I don't think that's good enough, and I think as members of the association you should be very concerned about that.
I'm afraid on that point we will have to leave it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.
And moderating that debate was Andrew Waterworth. Well, just to go back to Canberra now, the city, not the political centre, and despite its obvious national attractions, Canberra has never enjoyed what we call a good
liquidation sale in the Burnside Town Hall this week. Gillian Attrell reports that already the sale has turned over about $500,000.
Thousands have flocked to the sale since it began last Friday. Yesterday's stocks were exhausted and trading stopped. But today again the hall was crammed with fresh stock and even more people. Some queued for 2 hours in a line several hundred metres long. The trader, a company called Copper Art, is being investigated following a report by the Victorian Consumer Affairs Department, which accuses the company of poor service, poor quality goods and abusing customers following complaints. There have been 5 hearings before the Victorian Small Claims Tribunal in regard to Copper Art. Already South Australian Consumer Affairs have received some inquiries. Tonight, within half an hour, several customers made complaints to the company's buyer and customer relations officer, Mr Art Van Roost. But he said Consumer Affairs had nothing to warn the public about.
I don't think so. They have been here to investigate the products themselves, first of all. I haven't seen them here. And surely, if they would have talked to the public, I think they would have had a different opinion.
Are you guilty of appalling after-sales service, poor quality goods and uncooperative, abusive behaviour?
Again, ask the public. I think they will tell you different as well. And each and every one that would have had a small problem, either the money was refunded or exchanged for a different product.
How much stock and how much cash have you overturned in the past couple of days?
I don't like to really say that on the news for security reasons.
Can you sort of roughly give us some idea?
Could be in the vicinity of $500,000.
Legacy is...
Indeed, according to the findings of the consumer magazine Choice, in most cases you would have been better off not doing anything at all. Bruce Woolley reports.
If you've just bought a brand new car lately, it might not be too many years before it starts to look like this, riddled with rust. And getting it rust-proof won't help either. According to Choice, the magazine of the Australian Consumers Association, rust-proofing simply guarantees more rust. According to them, it's a waste of time and money. There are 2 products which are used for so-called rust-proofing. One is a rubberised liquid, which is sprayed into the wheel arches and the chassis of the car. But even the manufacturers claim it's not primarily a rust-proof, it's a sound deadener. The other chemical is used in the crevices of the car, in the panels, and it claims to displace moisture and to cure the metal against further rust. Now, some will use one, some will use both of these chemicals, but the Choice article raises some doubts as to whether either is very effective.
In summarising your findings, who's more to blame, the car manufacturers or the rust-proofing industry?
Well, both, but car manufacturers in Australia have been very lazy. They've caused the loss of thousands and thousands of sales by producing cars that just rust and don't meet Australian consumers' requirements.
But how is that? I mean, that seems like negligence. Why aren't they more on the ball?
I think that consumers haven't been sufficiently aware of some of the problems. Time and time again we report that quality control is shoddy. The industry spokespeople say the same things. It's about time that manufacturers recognised their social responsibilities and started saving a few jobs in their own industry.
Well, how can they be made to do that? What do you say should be done?
Well, for a start, in the case of rust-proofing, it's time they got much better standards to improve their performance. In the case of cars that are made here, we found that they rust far more frequently than imported cars made by the same people often.
You say in your report that rust-proofing your car is a waste of time and money. Does that say, really, that the rust-proofing industry is pulling a giant confidence trick?
Well, that's certainly the case. They mightn't even realise it themselves, but we asked 2,500 of our members what they thought, and they reported to us that cars with rust-proofing were more likely to rust than ones without. And that's because often they block up the holes when they're block up the drainage holes indoors when they're treating them, and cover dirt and lock it in.
That seems an extraordinary condemnation of the industry.
Certainly is. Poor practices abound.
It comes as no great surprise that the people who do the rust proofing have reacted strongly to the Choice survey. After all, it's their livelihoods at stake. Nevertheless, the Choice report doesn't leave much room for debate. Its most damaging discovery, that both treated and untreated cars rust at the same rate in the same places. Choice admits that plenty of people are happy with rust proofing, but many more aren't. However, those who apply the rust proofing still claim they get few complaints, if any, from customers. If somebody comes to you and gets their car rust proofed, does that mean that you guarantee that in 5 years' time there'll be no rust on that car?
Well, I would stand by it if someone did come back. But with all the guarantees that we've given people and said that we would do it, we haven't had any problems with people coming back.
Never?
Never.
Never in 20 years of working?
Over 20 years, and I've never had someone that's come back in 5 years and said it hasn't worked. And I'm quite happy to stand by anything that we do. And if someone did come back and it was due to faulty material or workmanship, I'd stand by it.
Well, how do you take then the arguments by Choice that cars that haven't been rust-proofed have less trouble with rust than cars that have?
Well, I can only think of maybe they weren't done properly, or they weren't maintained after they were done, they weren't cleaned.
How are they done properly?
Well, on a new car, we make sure the surface is clean and dry, so as we get a good application and good adhesion of the material. We make sure that we cover all the areas and we take our time with them. We certainly haven't had problems, so I feel that maybe someone's not doing their job properly.
Do the accusations from Choice come as a surprise to you? Have you heard of those sorts of accusations before?
Yes, they're no surprise to us at all. Well, there are complaints quite regularly about the rust-proofing industry.
Complaints to the RACV as well?
Yeah, we've had several complaints, but I think most of the complaints probably go to the Consumer Affairs departments or bureaus in each state.
Do they tend to be complaints about the product used or about the way it's applied?
Well, I think it's both the product and the application, but if you go to a smaller rust-proofing concern, it's probably the application that's the main concern.
What often is the problem?
Well, if the product's not applied correctly and properly to the body, water will collect between the product and the steel panels in the body and set up this little cell, and rust will take place at probably at a greater accelerated rate than if you didn't have the product applied in the first place.
So that explains the comment by Choice that some rust-proofed cars are in fact worse off than before.
If they're using the heavy-bodied material and that doesn't adhere to the body correctly, water will collect behind it and cause severe rust in those areas.
The Standards Association of Australia is working on a proposal to bring all these rust-proofing applications up to a single, high standard. It's a move supported by the Royal Automobile Clubs and by the makers of the better-known and better-selling products. The idea is to force the shonky dealers out of the marketplace.
They've been working on this for nearly 3 years. The standard will be in 3 parts. The first part covering the product itself, the second part the application, and the final part covering the contracts. The first part is due for publication later this year. The The second part will be due early next year, and then the contract later next year.
So in the meantime, the customer just has to beware.
Well, he has to beware that if he's going to get his car rust-proofed, he should go to a reputable one that's well known in the industry, and if necessary, he could check the Consumer Affairs people beforehand and see if they have any complaints about that particular applicator.
The Choice survey, though, says that it doesn't seem to matter who you go to, the problem still exists.
Yeah, well, we tend to believe that there's not a great deal of value for money in this additional application, because these days cars have a lot greater rust preventive treatment carried out when they're built. The paint processes and the anti-corrosion processes carried out in the industry are a lot more sophisticated now than they were previously. And cars of today's vintage will last a lot better.
The move to bring rust-proofing products under a single standard seems all very well, but readers of the Choice report must now be wondering whether there's any reason for the industry to continue at all.
Well, Mr. Lee, you've been in the rust-proofing business for 9 years. Is it a confidence trick?
No, it's not. No, Choice have made some very bad statements, and I believe that they've been based on a very badly designed survey. Now, we read through all the survey questions a long time ago. I'll give you an instance. As an instance, there was no differentiation whatsoever made between internal rust and external rust. Now, external rust comes from bad paintwork, from paint that's deteriorated, stone chips, damage, all sorts of things. Internal rust is all about inside doors, box sections, sills, bonnets, and etc., and that's the expensive rust because it just pops out.
But the major claims there seem to be about faulty workmanship, and the Royal Automobile Club gentleman said that there were a lot of complaints about that.
Well, that's why Enrust approached the Australian Standards Association. Some 5 years ago, we approached them with a view to getting a standard both of product, application and finally guarantee brought forward, and that is happening now.
Yes, but it's taken 5 years, hasn't it? Why has it taken so long?
Well, you've got technical people, you've got chemists, you've got a lot of things to bring together a standard of product. See, I noticed that they mentioned something about there was no zinc in anything. Well, of course there's no zinc in anything. The American Navy stopped using zinc years and years ago. We are not that type of application. We are a preventative application. We smother it.
Getting back to the question of Choice's questionnaire, are you basically implying that their questions were rigged, somehow set up to destroy the industry?
No, I don't think they were rigged at all. I just don't think they were wise enough to go to the Australian Standards Association or to the trade, to the industry itself, to find out. Now, they've been invited to every meeting of the Australian Standards Association since 1978, and they've never bothered to attend one of them.
But if they had come to you and asked you for your cooperation, would you have taken part?
Obviously, we've contacted them and tried to take part.
Well, all right, but nevertheless, what they've said seems to have been borne out by other claims from the Royal Automobile Club. Those claims would appear to be very damaging.
Well, the claims they've made are damaging, but then one has to look at what we do. We do all ICI vehicles that operate on the salt flats at Dry Creek. Now, we've been doing them for 8 years. They're no fools. They wouldn't keep having them done if we didn't considerably prolong the life of their vehicles. Same with BHP and Whyalla. Same with St John's Ambulance. You know, these people are not going to leave us. I'm not worried about the industry. I'm just worried about the poor public, because the poor public get exactly the same treatment as ICI's vehicles on the salt flats.
Well, the Consumer Association, Mr Asher, says that poor practices abound. Does that mean that the corporate people are getting the same treatment as well?
No, they don't abound, and these standards will rectify any practices that may abound. There is no doubt that we and the major rust proofers do not have poor practices.
Are there shoddy practitioners in the business?
Oh, I think they're nearly all gone now.
You're absolutely confident about that?
Oh, yes, very confident. They've nearly all gone now. They've been in and they've gone.
How damaging is that report going to be?
Well, I don't know. I hope that the public, and I'm sure that industry, will accept what we've been doing, because we've worked together for so long and we've had no problems. T. Stampier have written us a letter saying that since they've been dealing with Enrust, they have not had any rust problems. Well, you know, that's marvellous. They used to expect a vehicle to last 12 months.
Would you accept Choice opinions on other products?
Well, after reading their survey, I'm a little dubious. As a matter of fact, I don't subscribe to Choice and haven't for about 12 months, because I felt that if they do it that way with our product, then perhaps other products are in the same deal. I don't know.
So what's your advice, basically, to customers? Is it still a question of customer beware?
Well, no. My advice to customers is to, as the RACV man said, go to a major rust proofer, he will do the job properly. We have actually done 250,000 vehicles in the last 9 years with less than 1.5% claim rate.
Mr Lee, on that point we'll have to leave.
Queensland Cigarettes. Commissioner Michael Noblet says the man who operates a photocopying and mail order service in Hindley Street has been prosecuted a number of times by Consumer Affairs. Rick Burnett today went to meet the man behind the latest tax avoidance scheme.
To beat the newly introduced South Australian cigarette tax, an enterprise has started to import tax-free Queensland cigarettes at a saving up to $6 a carton. Meet Malcolm Peter Bailey, the Adelaide connection. When he migrated from Britain in 1961, he was Malcolm John Beasley, but he struck problems with that name and admits it frankly.
A person came over here from Western Australia, placed ads in the Advertiser to hire a girl to work on a horse farm or a horse stud, something of that nature, and he sexually assaulted her or raped her or something of this nature, and it was my name that he used. It was Malcolm John Beasley that came out in the press reports, and that was when I upped and went and changed my name at the same time.
But my research also shows you've used the name J. Cameron and even Major Peter Bennett.
I know how that came about. That is incorrect. There was the J. Cameron and the Bennett. We had an authority to use those particular names for bills to go to for advertising that was ran here.
The Consumer Affairs report of 1980 described the then Mr. Beasley's activities in these words, as varied as his names. The report called him a confidence trickster. He moved up in reputation in last year's report, described as a well-known entrepreneurial identity.
There's very, very few people in mail order that haven't had some kind of problem with Consumer Affairs in various states, any state. Presently, there is nothing illegal regarding the purchase of cigarettes from interstate, and for it to be made illegal, the state government would have to invoke another law.
If the venture is legal, might he consider an action of defamation against Consumer Affairs?
I couldn't be bothered hassling with them about it. People either accept me as I am or they don't. When you can sue, you can save, on an average, between $5 and $6 per carton of cigarettes. It looks good. Naturally, the government will want to kill it.
Bailey, Beasley, Bennett or Cameron, he admits he's done a bit of porridge, but says not for dishonesty.
Paul Hughes and Robert John Anderson cannot themselves be used car dealers, and they're also forbidden from working for anybody else. According to Consumer Affairs, Hughes had been the main proprietor of the yard, but in fact, much of the business had actually been conducted by Anderson. Commissioner Noblet says the bulk of the complaints against the pair revolved around a system of cars being sold on consignment. People who'd had
come from a government department, and as Russ Stiggins reports, the awards are designed to make life easier for the average man in the street.
The Gobbledygook Awards are contained within the latest annual report of the Commissioner for Consumer Affairs released today. During the year, nearly 9,000 complaints were investigated and almost 100,000 other inquiries were received. But the one that particularly caught the eye of Commissioner Andrew Noblet, and the one that led to the establishment of the Gobbledygook Awards, was this contract for the cartage of goods on the True Bridge. Literally, by magnifying glass, it's possible to read, for example, Clause 14, which includes 438 words in only 2 sentences.
Wrongful delivery, misdelivery, delay in delivery and non-delivery of cargo, whensoever, wheresoever and howsoever occurring, or any damage, injury or loss of any nature whatsoever.
Mr. Noblet says even experienced lawyers and investigation officers have difficulty in coping with that sort of legalese, and he'll be campaigning this year for plain language in legal documents.
This is the start of a crusade, if you like, that I'm engaging in to try and clean up this area and try and encourage businesses to put their contracts in readily understandable language.
How do you think you'll go?
Well, I think the 2 examples are probably the worst you could possibly find. There are many others, and I hope that businessmen will take the hint from this Gobbledygook Award, which may well go to somebody else next year, and will take some steps to try and clean up their contract. And
the dictionary defines gobbledygook as pompous, official or professional jargon, and that's exactly what Mr. Noblet found in the contract for carrying goods on the True Bridge. It's the work of the Commissioner for Highways and his managing agent, R.W. Miller and Company. This is it, actual size, and it includes a single clause that is 2 sentences long and contains 438 words, including thing to be done, purported to be done, omitted to be done, or other matter or thing may constitute, involve, or be solely or partly caused by, or otherwise due to default or misconduct. On a more serious note, Mr Noblet says his department received more than 104,000 complaints this past financial year. That's an average of 2,000 a week. Of those, 8,683 were investigated, like this one. The tray of this utility had been covered in foil and then spray painted to disguise the serious defects. On the subject of car rust proofing, Mr Noblet says the standard of services in this area were at best shoddy and at worst bordering on the fraudulent. Only 3 of 63 cars tested at random by the department were satisfactory. The Commissioner is also critical of the new standard contract for the members of the Housing Industry Association, saying it's complicated and couched in unnecessary legalistic terms which may not be understood by some builders, let alone consumers. He recommends everyone get a copy of his report because he believes it contains information and
Miller for the Trowbridge ferry contract for carrying goods. Try this for size. The provisions of this condition shall apply notwithstanding that such loss, damage, deterioration, contamination, evaporation, misdelivery, delay in delivery, non-delivery, thing to be done, purported to be done, or omitted to be done, or other matter or thing may constitute, involve, or be solely or partly caused by or otherwise due to default or misconduct, including... And so it goes on. This sentence alone contains no less than 247 words. Anyone who's had to carry goods on the Trowbridge and read this has the Consumer Affairs Commissioner's commiserations. After that miracle of creativity, there is just one small problem, and that is that the actual writing on this contract is so small that it's not legal anyway.
Chance to win news bingo by buying the Sunday Mail this Sunday. A card in your letterbox and one in the Sunday Mail.
Has warned that one company operating in South Australia doesn't guarantee to deliver what it promises.
This is the second time Consumer Affairs Commissioner Michael Noblet has warned about the activities of the company, Australian Scholarship Trust. Salesmen using this selling aid entice money out of parents on the basis that the cash will be invested for them, and at some time in the future their child will receive a scholarship. On the surface it seems to be a form of voluntary saving which offers the prospect of a greater than normal return when parents could most do with it. But Mr Noblet points out that the Australian Scholarship Trust at no time guarantees in writing the amount of the scholarship to be paid out to individual investors.
The amount depends on a number of factors, including the number of people that participate, the returns on the money, the success of the investments that the scheme makes. So there is absolutely no certainty as to the return that anyone will get from this scheme.
What concerns Mr Noblet even more is that despite a public warning and one direct to the Education Department, some schools are still circulating Australian Scholarship Trust's promotional material.
We're trying to identify the schools that are or have been distributing the material, and the Education Department has said that it will certainly follow that up.
We wanted to put Mr Noblet's allegations to the company concerned. We checked the telephone book and found that the company was operating out of this building, number 209 Greenhill Road. But when we checked here, we found that the businessman concerned only operated an answering service, and that had since closed down. But we were given another telephone number. And when we tried to contact the company concerned on an Adelaide number, a 332 number, no one answered the telephone call. So we'll try again tomorrow. Rustigans, Eyewitness News.
We'll take a short medical research. Among the news still to come, a report on the latest space shuttle mission.
For at least 10 years before a child reaches tertiary level studies. If a child doesn't achieve acceptance to tertiary studies, or if a parent withdraws from the scheme, the money put in is refunded with a small interest payment. This is where the scholarship money is made. 3/4 of the children don't achieve tertiary level, so 3 out of 4 people will lose a lot of interest on money paid in over 10 or more years. On top of that, Australian Scholarship Trust doesn't guarantee any minimum scholarship. This is what Consumer Affairs Commissioner Michael Noblet said about that last week.
The amount depends on a number of factors, including the number of people that participate, the returns on the money, the success of the investments that the scheme makes. So there is absolutely no certainty as to the return that anyone will get from this scheme.
Mr Noblet also warns that some schools are passing out literature on the scholarships, giving a false impression that the Education Department endorses them. Mr Tony Ward, the president of the Independent Providence Society of Victoria, which was set up to run the scholarship, is in Adelaide to defend the scheme.
We guarantee to return all the money that parents put into their savings accounts with us. We guarantee that explicitly, and a compounding interest factor as well. What we can't guarantee is the amount of the scholarship that we'll pay to a child, and it would be most improper and irresponsible of us to guarantee how much money we're going to pay them, because we simply don't know 15 years from now what the buying power of a dollar is going to be anyway. The main thing is we want to provide a living allowance to children.
I put to Mr Ward that it was a kind of lottery, with 75% of people losing.
I don't believe that they lose at all.
Well, they don't get as much as they would if they were putting that money into another interest-bearing fund.
Possibly not. With our tax freedoms, etc., parents do get their money back, and they do pretty well.
They haven't got a written guarantee of anything in the way of a scholarship.
Oh yes, they do have an absolutely guaranteed scholarship.
But it might be only $1.
It might be $10,000 too. We don't know. But
isn't
it won't
that
be $1.
Isn't the fact that you don't know a worry?
Not at all to us.
Michael Noblet is continuing his investigation of the scheme, and a check by Eyewitness News discovered that an accountant for the Independent Providence Society, a Mr Stan Jones, is facing court proceedings for allegedly transferring $517,000 from the Providence Society to another company. Rick Burnett, Eyewitness News.
Pet dingo Panama Max and his owner say goodbye. That story.
Purchaser was allowed an 8-day cooling-off period before making payment. Mr Noblet said the sellers were also failing to give written contracts and were claiming that the paintings were originals, when in fact they were produced very cheaply overseas. He said the Consumer Affairs Department was having particular problems because the individual hawkers were often itinerants and therefore difficult to trace.
An ocean-going yacht, which sank with 4 people aboard off Outer Harbour last night, has been raised from the seabed and towed into Port Adelaide. The 9-metre craft collided with another yacht during a race and went down within minutes of being hauled below the waterline.
It wasn't hard for the salvage crew to locate the stricken yacht. The tip of its mast could be clearly seen above the waves. The yacht's owner, David Henschel, had been competing in a twilight race organised by the Cruising Yacht Club when his vessel Ranger was struck by a Dragon-class yacht. Henschel and his 3-man crew abandoned ship and were picked up by another craft. The Ranger went down 1 mile northwest of the Outer Harbour breakwater, and this afternoon she was refloated to just below...
Yeah, Sergeant was Vicky, traffic commissioner. Hi, Wiz. Chicone, how you doing? Great. Look, could you do me a favour? Could you run a plate? You're wonderful, I love you. Oh.
In months, many wholesale dealers and wholesale car yards have sprung up around Adelaide. Most buy and sell in the trade, supplying other dealers at wholesale prices. Wholesalers can sell to retail buyers, that is, members of the public, but like any dealer, they must still offer the same warranties, regardless of the price. According to Consumer Affairs, some wholesalers have offered cars on the basis that no warranty exists on certain cars because it's being sold at a wholesale price. According to Consumer Affairs, the legislation is quite clear. No car can be displayed or offered for sale without a red sticker on the front windscreen. The notice carries warranty details, and only cars under $500 or older than 12 years don't get a warranty. Consumer Affairs Director Michael Noblet says the new legislation will move to tighten up controls of dealers registering business names. Those requiring the word wholesale in their trade name will have to prove to be just that, selling within the trade. He says in the meantime, wholesalers can't offer cars to the public without warranties.
They let people think that this is a wholesale yard and you're getting a special deal if they agree to sell to you, whereas they normally sell wholesale. That's very rarely the case. Usually the word wholesale is simply used to attract business.
And well-known Adelaide car wholesaler Justin Hanna says he does sell some cars to the public, but they all have warranties. He says anyone buying from a wholesaler should demand a guarantee.
If he claims to be a wholesaler, he still must give the warranty.
Who have operated here for the past decade. The warning came this afternoon from the Commissioner of Consumer Affairs, Michael Noblet. Russ Diggins has the details.
Loan sharking, rip-off, all those expressions come to mind. They're strong words, and they're words that I don't use very often, but I'm satisfied that those sort of expressions are the only ones that can reasonably be applied to this operation.
Mr Noblet was attacking this company, Action Home Loan Proprietary Limited and Action Mortgage Brokers of 14 Weymouth Street, Adelaide. In short, Mr Noblet says the loan shark operation has been preying on elderly people and people desperate for loan funds, that it uses hard sell techniques to persuade people to borrow money, that the fees charged to consumers who borrow are absolutely outrageous, and that the company has gone to great pains to avoid having to comply with South Australian law.
And I'm quite determined that any breaches of the law that have been committed by this company will be followed up and prosecuted to the full extent.
Action Home Loan Proprietary Limited is incorporated in Queensland. Its directors are listed as Lawrence Howard Horowitz, John William Richards and Francis Fu Si Kin, all of whom reside in Queensland. Action Mortgage Brokers is registered in the name of Horowitz and a Michael Shangi, who resides in Victoria. The company's been advertising in the press in Adelaide and has been operating here since about September last year. The full extent of the company's shady dealings in South Australia are still being investigated. The Consumer Affairs Department raided the place last week and is still shifting through a mountain of paper. But Mr Noblet says it's already known that the company worked on people who just couldn't get money elsewhere.
People like that tend to be very desperate. Desperate people tend to be very gullible. And that's why they've been able to operate in this way and to make what I consider are outrageous charges for lending money to these people.
We paid a call on Action Mortgage Brokers after Mr Noblet's public warning, but we were far from welcome. Hello, Rustigans, Channel 10. Is the manager about at all?
No, I'm afraid he's not, sir.
He's not? Can we talk to somebody here about some of the...
You can speak to him, sir.
Where can we contact the manager?
He won't be back today.
Where can we contact him at home then?
You can't.
Well, there have been some fairly serious allegations made against the company and we'd like to talk to somebody about them. I think that it's only fair that we offer the opportunity to address yourselves to these claims. Yeah, Rustigans, Channel 10, mate.
Yeah,
we're just wondering,
please.
We're just wondering
Could you
whether
move out, please?
Can we speak to somebody about the claim?
Mr Noblet says investigations reveal that over 70 loans were made by the company, and he's asked anyone who may have dealt with the organisation to contact his office on Adelaide 228 3211 as a matter of urgency. Rustigans, Eyewitness News.
The Maverick picket issue, and the Supreme Court today granted an interim injunction prohibiting the picket line outside the Maverick furniture factory at Marion.
Home Loan or Action Mortgage Brokers is a sham. Consumer Affairs Commissioner Michael Noblet has warned people to stay away.
Well, the words that come to mind are words like loan sharking, rip-off and things like that. They're very strong words and words that I don't use very often, but I've been involved in the administration of our credit legislation since 1973, first as Registrar of the Credit Tribunal and subsequently as Commissioner for Consumer Affairs, and this would be the worst case of this sort of loan sharking operation that I've seen in the whole of that time.
Mr Noblet's talking about this Queensland incorporated company, the Action Home Loan or Action Mortgage Brokers at 14 Weymouth Street in the city. A company, he says, uses hard sell techniques to get people to borrow money. From hundreds of files seized only a few days ago, Mr Noblet says a public warning is necessary and that the name of the company is being released under the Wrongs Act. Mr Noblet says it's apparent from the files that the loan repayments covered only interest rates, and at the end of 2 years the loan had to be repaid in full immediately. In one case, a borrower would have had to take out a second loan to repay the first, and in one instance a woman stood to lose her home. Mr Noblet says the company's not complying with South Australian law. And when we tried to speak with someone at the office, the door was closed in our faces, the lights were turned out, and they refused to come to the door. Mr Noblet urged anyone who's had dealings with the company to contact Consumer Affairs on 228 3211.
For the first time in the US presidential race...
One of the memos says that you should take control at every interview and not allow the consumer to seek the information that he wants, but make sure you get the information that you want. There's another document that says to the salespeople involved in this organisation, if you're in somebody's home and you fail to make the sale or fail to get them agree to take the loan, you are to ring the loans manager before you leave the home and explain the reason. Now, if that's not hard selling tactics, I don't know what is.
Mr Noblet gives this example of a transaction for a loan of $8,000 to a 73-year-old woman. From her $8,000, the following was to be deducted. Guarantee fee, $1,200. Solicitor's costs, $790. A loan initiation fee, $180. Application fee $100, valuation fee $150, 6 months prepaid interest $840, fire insurance and bank charges $120. Of the $8,000 loan she thought she'd signed for, she was to actually receive just $4,620. While Consumer Affairs and the Crown Solicitor are apparently looking for some legal means to close the company down, late this afternoon they were still open and still apparently waiting for their next potential customer.
Consumer Affairs as the worst loan shark operation he's seen in South Australia for years. Mr. Michael Noblet described the business dealings of Action Home Loan Proprietary Limited and an associated firm, Action Mortgage Brokers, as a rip-off. Rick Teague reports.
In the past fortnight, officers of the Department of Consumer Affairs have visited the company's offices in Weymouth Street in the city and have seized documents. As a result, the Consumer Affairs Commissioner, Mr. Noblet, has strongly urged people not to have any dealings with a Queensland-based company which isn't registered in this state. He says documents reveal that fees charged by the company are outrageous. One of the horrifying aspects of the case is that repayments have been structured so the borrower is virtually paying only the interest and then after a term has elapsed has to repay almost the whole of the principal.
By a very legalistic and convoluted series of documents that the consumer is asked to sign, it looks as if the Adelaide firm is acting as a broker for a Queensland company and that the transactions take place in Queensland. They've even gone to the extent of having the borrower sign, instead of signing a loan agreement, signing a power of attorney in favour of the Queensland company, authorising the Queensland company to sign an agreement with itself on behalf of the Adelaide borrower to borrow the money. Now, I've come to the conclusion that that is simply a sham and that the company hasn't successfully avoided the operation of South Australian law, and we're going to enforce the South Australian law to the full extent that the facts that disclosed by our investigation will permit.
It's perhaps understandable that the company this afternoon closed its
And the managing
doors.
director of that loan company. We'll see you there.
In Adelaide, this is Rick Teague.
In the long-running Mabarak Brothers dispute, hello, thanks for joining us. Borrowing money seems to have become a national disease, and in difficult economic times, there are always those who are ready to exploit the unwary and the desperate. Some people get so badly in debt that they have to borrow money just to pay back their original loans. In South Australia, the Commissioner for Consumer Affairs, Michael Noblet, has taken the highly unusual step of issuing a public warning to anyone thinking about borrowing money from a company known as Action Home Loans. Action Home Loans is a big company. It's got branches in every state in Australia. Mr. Noblet says the company is running by far the worst loan sharking operation he's seen in more than a decade. He says some of the company's operations are an outright sham. We'll be speaking to both Mr. Noblet and the General Manager of Action Home Loans a little later in the program. But first, Michael Munro has this background report on the sorts of methods being used to sign people up.
There's no law in the land that let anything like that go through. They couldn't. It's downright robbery. Now I can see it now. I didn't see it at the time.
Deaf and partially blind, 89-year-old Harold Turner didn't see the fine print. Fine print which can now take his Adelaide home. And all for a $2,000 loan. Widowed pensioner Glenys Dunstan is another who stands to lose her home. She borrowed $4,000.
I think they stink. They're the biggest mob of crooks that they should all be publicly... Something should be done to them in public. No, I couldn't possibly say it now, but I think you can imagine what I and many others would like to do to them.
In fact, it's hundreds of people around the country who have been stung by the Queensland-registered company Action Home Loan Proprietary Limited. Their branch office here in Adelaide has been all but closed down by the South Australian Consumer Affairs Department. A $2,000 loan, after interest and other charges, becomes $7,000. A $4,000 loan becomes $10,000. And those who can't pay lose their homes. The operation surrounding Action Home Loans seems to centre around the confusion and ignorance of the borrower. There is so much paperwork and hard sell that few borrowers realise that they pay virtually only interest for the first 2 years before having to pay back the full loan in a lump sum.
I've been involved in the administration of credit legislation in this state, in South Australia, for 11 years now, and this company is operating by far the worst loan sharking operation I've seen during the whole of that time.
Consumer Affairs Commissioner Michael Noblet.
It operates by lending money to people at the bottom end of the market, people that probably are finding it difficult to obtain loans from the normal sources.
They more or less fell over themselves, well, acted as though they were falling over themselves to help a pensioner, or, as they said, anyone in low financial incomes, and they would go out of their way to assist them. Well, of course they would. It's an easy way of getting their hands on cheap property in South Australia.
You do feel you've been taken advantage of?
Yes, definitely. I'd give anything to get out of this bloke. Have him here.
What would you do to him?
Oh, I wouldn't do any vicious. No vicious about me. Might put a bullet in him or something, but...
The company lends them an amount of money which is far in excess of the amount that the person actually wants because of all the fees that are charged, and these are added on to the amount of the loan. For example, if you want to borrow $8,000, you generally have to borrow about $12,000 to cover all of the necessary fees.
How do its representatives actually work?
Well, they seem to use hard selling tactics, which one would expect, say, from certain door-to-door salesmen or used car salesmen, but which one wouldn't ordinarily expect from a finance organisation.
If you can't pay back this money at the end of the 12 months, what stands to happen?
Well, according to all that I've been told, I possibly could lose my home. I will fight like blazes to make sure that this does not happen. I went too long without to make sure that my kiddies had something and some sort of security, and I'm not going to give in without a fight.
We'll be back to talk to Mr. Noblet and the General Manager of Action Home Loans in just a moment. To describe the company Action Home Loans and the way it goes about its lending activities, words like loan sharking, rip-off and exploitation. The company has strongly denied the claim, and in our Brisbane studios tonight we have the General Manager of Action Home Loans, Mr. John Richards. Mr. Richards, thank you for joining us this evening. The Commissioner for Consumer Affairs in South Australia has said some very strong, very serious things. Amongst other things, he has said, I don't often use the expression rip-off, but that's the only way to describe the business of Action Home Loan Proprietary Limited. If we take the example, for instance, a case which did occur of a 73-year-old woman who wanted to borrow $8,000 from your company, in fact, she would only receive $4,620 out of that because the rest would have been deducted by your company as a fee. Now, is that correct?
That's correct at this point, Jana, but I feel it should be pointed out that our lending is done on mortgage, in other words, secured by real estate. A lot of those costs to which Mr. Noblet refers, in the particular case and instant, are legal costs, cost of preparation of documents which would normally apply with any bank, building society, or any other financial institution.
Mr. Richards, let's have a look at those costs and the breakdown. Now, what, for instance, is the guarantee fee that you list there of $1,200?
The guarantee fee is paid to a company called Nafoxy Proprietary Limited. That guarantees the borrower the funds.
Right.
These mortgages, if I may continue, are unsold to a third party. Our company, Action Home Loan, in turn guarantees the repayment of all monies to the purchaser of that mortgage.
Let me just go through some of the others of them. Solicitors costs $790, loan initiation fee $180, application fee $100, valuation fee $150, fire insurance and bank charges $120, 6 months prepaid interest $840. Not too much?
Not too much when you consider the bulk of those costs are any other costs that would occur with any other lending institution.
Well, at this point, I wonder if we could go to Adelaide, where we do have the Commissioner for Consumer Affairs there, Mr. Noblet. Mr. Noblet, what's your reaction to that? Not too much to ask of borrowers?
Good evening, Anna. Mr. Richards is talking absolute nonsense, Yana, and he knows it. The fact is that that 15% fee, which is charged for a guarantee, is not only plainly exorbitant, is probably unnecessary anyway. Mr. Richards just said that they lend on mortgage security. When people buy mortgages from them, they're told and this point is emphasised, that the company only lends where there is a good equity in the home. In other words, there's rock-solid security. Now, if the security is so good, why does the company find it necessary to charge the borrower a fee of 15% of the amount of the loan for so-called guarantee, which is of no benefit to the borrower at all?
Now, at the end of this procedure, the borrower is expected to repay what's left. That is $7,700 in this case, out of what was supposedly an $8,000 loan in a lump sum. That's correct, isn't it, Mr. Noblet?
That's correct, and the amount actually received was something like $4,200 and something, and in 2 years' time they'd have to pay back about $7,700.
Mr. Richards, how are those people expected to come up with that sort of money?
Yana, bridging finance or interest-only finances we lend is quite a common type of lending throughout this industry.
Mr. Noblet, is it common?
Yes, it is quite a common type of lending, and also it's quite common for lenders to insist on some sort of mortgage guarantee insurance. Now, that insurance is available through reputable Australia-wide companies for, in a case like the one we're talking about, between 0.4% and 1% of the amount borrowed, depending on the loan-to-valuation ratio. Now, why this company charges 15%, I cannot imagine. Well, I can, really, because the company No Foxy Proprietary Limited, which Mr. Richards mentioned, happens to have as one of its directors Mr. Larry Horowitz, who was also a director of Action Home Loan Proprietary Limited.
So that fee is basically going to the same people?
Exactly. Mr. Horowitz gains both ends of the transaction.
Mr. Richards, the accusation is, I suppose, that you're hitting people who are vulnerable and you're manipulating. That's the accusation made by the Commissioner. Is he wrong again?
You're certainly wrong, Yana. Let me explain one situation. Mr. Noblet has us as precious salesmen. We have loan representatives that actually call out and see people. Prior to any documents at all being signed, our loan representatives go through with the people, the cost in detail. Nothing is hidden from the prospective borrower. If the borrower likes the situation, then he will accept the proposition. If not, no loan proceeds.
Mr. Richards, we've spoken to a few people who have entered into loan transactions with your company. Perhaps we could have a look at a piece from them now.
Well, I've borrowed and received a cheque for $4,014. I'm up for $7,500 at the end of 12 months, with nothing of what I've been paid coming off.
And that's after $140 a month for the year?
That's right, plus the 6 months prepaid monies that I've already paid to them.
So it's almost $10,000?
Almost $10,000 for $4,000.
Mr. Richards, $10,000 for $4,000. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I think to answer that correctly, you'd have to look at the way the money was dispersed, what the money was used for. Could have very well been that there were arrears on an existing mortgage. It could well have been that there were accounts paid out, a hire purchase account. Could have been anything. And to say what is the situation without actually seeing the disbursement is a bit difficult.
There does appear to be a recurring pattern, though, in loans involving your company. That is that people enter into these transactions, seek a certain loan, a very large fee is taken out by your company, and those people, after a period of perhaps 2 years, end up owing your company almost as much as they requested the loan for. Now, to a reasonable person, to an outsider, that seems exorbitant.
I don't agree, Anna. I think we had Mr. Noblet, and you've just put on the screen the sound from a person supposedly unhappy. I have with me at present a list of letters we've received from people throughout Australia, and quite a few from South Australia, thanking us for the service that we do provide.
Are those letters, Mr. Richards, from borrowers or from investors?
From borrowers, Mr. Noblet, yes.
I challenge you to produce any letters from borrowers in South Australia who say they're entirely satisfied.
I'm quite happy to produce these to you, Mr. Noblet, as I would have been had, prior to making your statement, you had been prepared to talk to us regarding the complaints you supposedly had.
You had the opportunity to talk to me on the 23rd of July, Mr. Richards. You flew down to Adelaide expressly for that purpose.
That was quite some time, Mr. Noblet.
You took some advice from your solicitor and got on the first plane back to Brisbane.
Mr. Noblet, that was quite some time after you made the allegation.
I wonder if I can ask you, having just seen that lady, that particular lady, I mean, do you feel any sympathy for somebody like that who is in an impossible loan situation as a result of the tie-up she's had with your company?
Yeah, no, facts were made available to the people long before they actually signed the particular loan. We do not force people to take the loans as Mr. Noblet would have us believe.
Do you feel
Mr.
sorry
Richards,
for that woman?
I feel that that woman has certainly received the monies and been used for which she's required them for.
Mr. Richard, your instructions to staff tell them not to talk about, at the interview stage when they're trying to get a signature on a contract, not to talk about the fees and charges because it only confuses people. We also have evidence and witnesses to establish that the document that they are asked to sign, acknowledging the fees that are going to be deducted from the amount of the loan, is signed with a couple of fees included and the rest of the fees in blank. And in blank squares are initialled and filled in later by your employees.
Mr. Noblet, I'm quite prepared to make available to you copies of what we term a schedule of payment, where at the initial interview we go through and explain the cost to the people. I'm also prepared to make available to you a list of a full disbursement with each item individually initialled by the borrower, acknowledging those costs and signed.
Yes, as I said, those initials are obtained against blank squares on that form and the details are filled in later.
I disagree with you completely.
Well, I can
sir.
certainly produce evidence that that's so in at least some cases.
Mr. Richards, it seems that you're at odds not only there with Mr. Noblet in Adelaide, but with a lot of other people around Australia. For instance, Peter Spiker, the Victorian Minister for Consumer Affairs, has told us that he's appalled by the tactics being employed by Action Home Loans and is warning consumers against having any dealings with the company. Mr. George Pachulo, the New South Wales Minister for Consumer Affairs, says that the department was considering action under the Money Lending Act to preclude the charging of prepaid interest. Now, also Neville Harper, Minister for Justice in Queensland, advising anyone caution in dealing with your company and advising them to seek independent legal advice before entering into any relationship with your firm. Now, it doesn't sound good, does it?
Yeah, and I think there's quite a bit of misunderstanding with Mr. Harper. There was a section in the Cairns Post within the last 14 days which the Cairns Post contacted the Justice Minister's department, was advised that Action Home Loan was not doing anything illegal, and that if people wished to pay those rates, they had the right to do so.
Mr. Richards, all this misunderstanding, in 4 states, all this misunderstanding between ministers, between commissioners for consumer affairs and your company. Bad communication, you say?
Yeah, and I feel that should we be breaking the law, and with one minor exception in West Australia where we'll fine $100, we have not been charged nor convicted of any breach of any act throughout Australia.
Mr. Noblet, how would you finally sum up the operations of Action Home Loans?
Absolutely abominable, Jana. I can only reinforce the advice that's already been given to people that they should in no circumstances have anything to do with this company in South Australia. The company, I believe, is flagrantly in breach of South Australian law, and I'll be taking whatever action I can under the law to ensure that that doesn't continue.
Anything else you'd like to say, Mr. Richards?
Not at this point, thank you, Jana.
Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us this evening. We'll take a break and we'll be back in a moment. Western suburbs named Kerry Tombs. 2 years ago, it seemed that Kerry's baby daughter Matilda had succumbed to the mystery ailment known as cot death. Kerry revived her, only to find Matilda was
investigating Action Home Loans 2 months ago after complaints from borrowers of exorbitant interest rates and unreasonable mortgage guarantees. Consumer Affairs Commissioner Michael Noblet says the company is the worst loan sharking organisation he's ever seen. He says it's been ripping off South Australian consumers for thousands of dollars. After investigating the company's documents, he says it now appears the company was operating without a licence. And that could mean its 74 borrowers won't have to pay interest on their loans, which total $675,000.
Well, if we can establish that the company should have had a licence during the whole of its time of operation here and it didn't, then the effect of that automatically under our Consumer Credit Act is that the company is not able to recover or to retain any credit charges on those loans. That means that these people virtually have interest-free loans, and any payments that they've already made are treated as having been made in reduction of the principal.
Mr. Noblet says it's important borrowers make no more home loan repayments until the company's dealings are sorted out by its liquidators. And if they haven't yet done so, they're asked to contact the Department for Consumer Affairs.
We'll have a break and be back with more news in just a moment.
Government ministers use the game to juggle their department budgets. And as Lexi Hamilton-Smith reports, surprisingly, they stayed in the black.
Budget or Bust is a board game designed for anyone over 10 years old. You play it as a family and either make big money or go bankrupt. That's where the lessons on how to balance a family budget are learned. It's the brainchild of teachers Gary Allen and Rob Harding.
Basically, people play the game by picking up cards, entering values on record sheets, and then they can think about spending, and what they can buy is around the perimeter of the board.
The game was launched today at Unley Primary School, so what do the children think of it?
It teaches me what Mum and Dad go through at home when they can't, if I ask them for a new bike and they don't have enough money.
Lots of fun because you get most of the things, but sometimes you don't get it because we have to pay off some bills and that.
Education Minister Lynn Arnold and Consumer Affairs Minister Chris Sumner, both family men, tried their hand at the game with their multi-million-dollar budgets in mind.
Well, in fact, I've just come from a budget meeting with the Treasurer this morning as we were talking about the education budget. Maybe I'll take this along with me next time.
So Budget or Bust isn't only for children, it's for adults too, and it'll soon be available around the country. And
stretching the weekly pay packet as far as you can might not seem like a fun game, but when it's pretend money, well, that's different. And these children at Unley Primary School have certainly had fun buying roller skates and adding to the house. But not quite as much fun when they discover the cost of white ants or when they have to take out a bank loan to pay bills and funeral costs.
It just teaches the kids that money doesn't grow on trees and it's a lot harder for the parents than what the children think it is.
The game was developed by two Adelaide teachers, Gary Allen and Rob Harding. It sells for $27.50 and it's not only meant for primary schools. Two politicians put that to the test this morning. Education Minister Lynn Arnold and Consumer Affairs Minister Chris Sumner joined the make-believe families and brushed up on some of the basic skills they use to keep watch on their departments. The game has received international praise and there's a possibility it will be marketed worldwide.
Still to come in
colour cans. Alan Khaliji reports the cans could explode with the power of a .22 calibre bullet.
The brand in question is the Helene Curtis Light and Shine foam. Originally imported from New Zealand, a batch of 2,000 were found to be faulty 2 years ago. 1,200 were recalled and it was thought there'd be no great danger to the public because the brand was strictly for professional use. But 2 weeks ago, a can owned by a member of the public exploded in a domestic bathroom. The impact destroyed a bathroom cabinet. Michael Noblet says there are fears other cans may have found their way into the hands of the public.
The reason apparently is that the manufacturing process was faulty in that the seam of the can is normally treated on the inside with something that stops it corroding. This wasn't properly treated, or cans of this batch weren't properly treated, as a result of which the seam is liable to corrode and after a time will eventually give way, and there's a fair bit of pressure, as you can imagine, inside an aerosol
The aerosol cans are light and shine foam in colour rinse. Because the cans aren't lacquered on the inside, they're subject to corrosion. The older they are, the more likely they are to explode. They were imported from New Zealand 2 years ago and recalled almost immediately when the fault was discovered. Because of the Adelaide incident, the Department of Public and Consumer Affairs fears there could still be more around.
Light and shine foam in colour rinse. Sally Clark reports that householders discovering the can should ask the department to dispose of it.
2,000 cans of the hair colour were imported 2 years ago for trade use. When it was found the cans were faulty, 1,200 were returned through a voluntary recall. But now the Consumer Affairs Department has found that some of the remaining cans have found their way into private homes.
A lady who had one of these cans on her bathroom shelf in her bathroom cabinet, and it suddenly exploded when no one was around, fortunately, so no one was injured, but it did some considerable damage to the bathroom. And apparently the reason was that the seams on the cans when they were manufactured weren't properly sealed on the inside, and as a result the pressure, which is quite considerable in an aerosol can of this kind, built up, and the seams eventually corroded and the can exploded at the weak point down that seam.
What sort of liquid comes out of them? Is it dangerous?
I'm not sure yet what the propellant gas is. It's probably propane or butane or freon, but whatever it is, it would be almost certainly a below zero temperature gas, which would cause severe damage to the skin if it came into contact with you. So obviously the damage that you would suffer if you were actually using it at the time it exploded would be even more serious, apart from the fact that it explodes with the force of a .22 rifle bullet, I'm told.